Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Mr. Clockwork Apple, and this is Skulduggery Pleasant. It's a dark fantasy novel by one Derek Landy, you can see his name up there, and it's quite a long running series. I think there's about 11 books so far, and they're still going, by the way. And they just won't stop getting darker and darker and more brutal and more miserable as it goes on, and I love it for that. I love how dark this series can get at times, and so I'm going to share it with you now. So Skulduggery Pleasant, despite being named after this guy here, actually focuses on this girl here. This is Stephanie Edgley, and the story starts when Stephanie's uncle, who's a famous horror writer, basically dies. Just that's it. There's no flair, no mystery, no intrigue, he just dead. And at his funeral, Stephanie briefly meets this strange mystery man wearing a long overcoat and a big hat, and basically bizarre mystery man. Your classic mystery person. I can't put it any other way than that. It's about as cliched and stupidly mysterious as you can possibly get. And the funeral goes ahead, the will is read out, and it turns out Stephanie has inherited her uncle's complete utter fortune and his mansion. So with the new mansion, Stephanie decides she's going to spend the night there just as a sort of token idea that her uncle has left her this house, so she should at least spend a night there, you know, just on the grounds that it's hers now. You know, makes sense, kind of. I think she's 12, it doesn't make that much sense. I mean, really, when I was 12, I wouldn't want to spend a night in a mansion where my uncle just died, but, you know, Stephanie's not me. She's definitely not me. And when she's spending the night in the house, she gets attacked by a stranger who can, for some reason, throw fireballs out of his hands. You know, like most strangers can. And then the mystery guy from the funeral arrives. He manages to repel the home invader, but not without losing his disguise, and revealing that he's actually a skeleton. You know, great plot twist there, guys. I didn't see that this guy was going to be a skeleton. Yeah, you really had me going there. Anyway, this is Skulduggery Pleasant. He's a sorcerer and a detective, so that's like two of the best things ever merged into one here. He was also a close personal friend of Stephanie's uncle, and I guess now has to be a close personal friend of Stephanie by way of her uncle's request. Skulduggery reveals that Uncle Edgley's books weren't exactly as fictional as everyone thought, and most of them were based on the adventures of various famous and powerful sorcerers who exist in secret around the world, because, you know, this is a modern fantasy novel. People have to keep magic secret for some reason. You know, can't have the ordinary people knowing about magic, God forbid. And although Stephanie's uncle wasn't magical himself, now that he's dead, the entire magical community is after this treasure that he was rumoured to have owned. No one knows what it is or where he hid it, but everyone suddenly thinks now that he's dead, this is the time to go after this supposed treasure. And of course, with everyone after it, I mean, Stephanie herself is now in serious danger because all of the magical world's lunatics are going to be coming after her to try and figure out if she knows where the treasure's hidden. So Skulduggery himself is trying to find out where the treasure is, basically so he can stop it getting into the wrong hands, find out if it's if it's real, and then if it's dangerous, he can hopefully keep it safe. So Stephanie manages to convince Skulduggery that basically her travelling with him would be safer than her just staying behind and being attacked all the time, because, you know, if some random skeleton dude turned up in my life, I think I'd immediately trust him more than anything else. I mean, that's just normal, isn't it? So Skulduggery basically agrees to let her travel and help with the search, and so the two set off and the adventure begins. And then once the adventure has begun, it somehow keeps them going for all these books here. One thing I should mention about the series is that throughout all the 9 books that I happen to have right here with me, let me just try and lift these things up here, look how many of these damn things there are, is that the books sort of form trilogies. So these first 3 books here form one trilogy, these next 3 books form a second trilogy that follows on. So each trilogy has its own little story arc, its main villain, and so on and so forth. But, you know, trying to wave all these books around, let me just You know, if you just look at all these damn books, I can't wave all this around all the time, so I'm just going to wave the first one around for the sake of simplicity. So, one of the best things about the Skulduggery series is its characters. Stephanie forms the classic fish out of water kind of character, and most of her time is spent reacting to this magical world that she's slowly discovering. And I feel this is relatively good writing because she's discovering it at the same time as the readers, which means most of the time her reactions will match up to your own if you're reading the book for the first time, obviously. And unfortunately, what that also means is that for some of the earlier books, Stephanie's character can be a little bit bland. She doesn't have any defined place in the world yet. She's mostly just here to react to all the amazing, wondrous things going on around her. Although as the series goes on, she does definitely develop quite a bit further, becoming more and more of a fleshed out character, which isn't necessarily a good thing. I'll get to that a bit later. Of course, considering the series is named after him and he's on the cover, Skulduggery himself is basically the star of the show. Not only does he act as Stephanie's mentor throughout the book, but he is also an absolute riot just to read this guy. Every single line of his is just dripping with absolute sarcasm, and he is just such a hilarious character to read. I'm just going to put one of my favourite quotes right here for you to see. You know, I just love this guy here. And you know, I feel that quote basically just sums this guy up so perfectly. It is just fantastic, this guy's writing. Along with the two main characters who are focused obviously on the book covers themselves, there's also plenty of other characters to fill up the story. You know, it's not just these two. Probably my favourite character is Ghastly Bespoke. He's this unstoppable badass sorcerer. He's this champion level boxer, and he's also one hell of a tailor as well. You know, he makes all the magic resistant suits that the main characters wear. He's this deadpan, sarcastic bastard, basically. And he's probably just one of my favourite characters throughout the series. I always love the scenes that he's in. Other good characters include China Sorrows, who's this mysterious book collector. She's definitely got a past, and sometimes it seems she doesn't care about anything other than the rare books she collects, which is, you know, as someone who collects books himself, you know, you can see I collect books. You know, I feel I can definitely relate to that part of her character. And there's also Tanith Lowe, who's this wandering mercenary. She's always hilarious on screen because of how, you know, she's so overly confident and always seems to get injured. I actually found out, for people who do know this series, and vaguely interesting fact for those who don't, the character Tanith Lowe was actually supposed to die in this first book here. And considering she later on gets a book of her own, you know, about 8 or so books in, I think we can see that she obviously didn't. Like Stephanie and Skulduggery, every character goes through all kinds of development as the series goes on. And once again, not necessarily a good thing. I'll get to that later. So, probably one of my favourite things about this series is just how dark it can be at times. And when I describe this series to people, it generally goes a little bit like this. So, you know how dark the Harry Potter books get? Yeah, I know how dark the Harry Potter books get. Well, this series, starts that dark, and it gets worse. Worse, you say? And not only are the themes really dark, but the deaths are absolutely brutal in this book. There is just so many ways people can die in this series, and it's so much detail goes into everything that happens to them. If you don't have a strong stomach, you will feel sick at some points reading these books. There's this one guy in the first book, notable because he's like the first on-screen death in the series, where because of his fire powers, basically they make him weak to water, and he falls and gets pushed into a river. Well, the easy way to put it would be he dissolves. That would be the easy method, but no, this book can't just say he dissolved. It goes through this full description of his flesh melting away, his bones starting to burn, and it is so disgusting the amount of detail that goes into this guy's death. And I also really like the amount of detail in these books that goes into the world building and the history of the world it takes place in. it's very clear that there's a lot more going on to this series than first meets the eye. Every character has some hidden secret past that we don't know about yet, and you find out as it goes on. And there's also a lot of detail that goes into exactly how magic works in this universe. It's not just, they don't just say, hey, it's magic. No, we find out precisely what makes magic go, why some people have it, why some people don't, what's particularly interesting about it. Now, I mentioned a few times throughout this video, I would say some of the things that I didn't like about the character development. I mentioned earlier that Stephanie in this book isn't very interesting, and in some of the later ones, as her character develops, she gets downright unlikable. She becomes this selfish, self-absorbed, complete unlikable character. And the problem is, every single character in these books at some point goes through this stage of being, you lose your faith in the characters. You can't like them during that point. And I get the idea that that's the sort of dark nature of the series, and it's supposed to be because they all have mysterious pasts and whatnot. By the end of the series, even the most dedicated fan is going to feel that their favourite character has crossed the line at some point. There's very few characters that you can just spend the whole time thinking, I like this guy. Although every character gets this, I feel that it was Stephanie here that really gets it worst of all. She gets the most screen time, so she gets the most time to be a terrible person, which can sometimes ruin my enjoyment of the series. So, overall, the Skulduggery series is this all-round, solid, dark fantasy series. There's some great comedy moments throughout, and some very memorable characters, really good world building, and some downright brutal fight scenes. Although the series may be sometimes a bit too dark for younger readers, I can definitely recommend maybe leaving it till you're about 14, 15, if you're planning to get this for someone. Definitely not a kid's series, this. And sometimes the characters can be a bit too unlikable at times, I did mention that. But overall, very good series, I can definitely recommend it. You get all these books here, there's even more of them coming out now, I haven't got yet, but I will someday. And as well as the 9 main books, there's also 2 extra books here, which one focuses on the character Tanith, which I showed earlier, and the other was a sort of collection of short stories that couldn't really fit in anywhere else. I definitely recommend reading the other 9 books first before trying before these 2. And for my final leaving on this video, I would just like to leave you with my absolute favourite quote from this entire series, and one that I feel really sums up the level of dark humour this series have. So without further ado, my favourite quote.